I got to thinking last night because, I was going outside trying to see the conjunction where Venus and Jupiter are coming into alignment. But there was too many clouds. And my guess is that no one in our city probably could see it. And it got me to thinking about something, and so I'm going to share it with you. So perhaps it'll change your mind about how you look at some things. I don't know what's going on with that light, but the feasts of the Lord. I've told you, if you've ever listened to me, that the feasts of the Lord are God's calendar. And He does things according to those times. Excuse me. You can be in religion, specifically the church, for your entire life, and you're not going to understand the feast days because they think they are the feasts of Israel or their Jewish feasts. But that's not what God says. God says these are my feasts. And that word for feast is moed, and it means appointed times. So these are God's appointed times. So you'll see how I'm bringing this to what happened last night. The feast days, there's only one feast day that's on the first day of the month. And if you remember anything about what I've taught you, the month, it begins when you see the first sliver on the right side of the moon. And then it goes through its cycle where it gets to a full moon, and then it wanes and it goes to where there's just the last little sliver on the left side. And then it goes dark for a couple of days, and then you see the little sliver. Well, when they saw the sliver, that was the first day of the month. So there would be days when they couldn't see the sliver. Okay. Cloud cover, whatever. And so on the feast, it didn't really matter all that much, but on the Feast of Trumpets, which is the first day of the 7th month, in God's calendar, it would be when they first saw. And I'm going to throw in something here, a little side point, just so you understand something. There's always a vestige of God's truth in the world. So, for example, our first 8 months are all named after Roman gods, the last one being August. But then we get to September and October and November and December. In September, if you have septuplets, you've had 7 children, even though it's our 9th month. And October, an octopus has 8 tentacles, even though it's our 10th month. November, neve means 9, even though it's our 11th month. And December, a decade is 10 years. A decathlon has 10 events. So it's 10, even though it's our 12th month. Those are the vestiges of truth about God's calendar. God's calendar is what we would today call September, is the 7th month. Sometime in mid to the end of September begins the 7th month in God's calendar. And I've said this to you many times. God is not stupid enough to start the new year in the middle of winter. God starts the new year when things start growing. Okay, that's a side point. But the Feast of Trumpets is on the first day of the 7th month. And so it was important that they get it kind of close or right, because this is God's calendar. The Feast of Trumpets was a big day for them because it was a feast day. And so what they did is they would set aside 2 days for the Feast of Trumpets. And they understood that if you couldn't see the sliver on the first day for whatever reason, it didn't show up, clouds were too much, storms, whatever, that the next day would be the Feast of Trumpets. And I'm just going to say this very bluntly, which is kind of what I do a lot of times regarding these subjects. As I mentioned, you could go till you're 100 years old and never learn about the feast days in the religious circle that you go in. When Jesus said, "No man knows the day or the hour," and let me add this right here, regardless of whether a Christian is just every Christian, no matter how much they're into it or no matter how little they're into it, they've heard that verse. It's kind of like I would say to you, you might not know one verse where about hell, what you think of hell is in the Bible. You have no idea, but you know what you think hell is. And you know what you think, and no man knows the day or the hour means. Well, let me just slap you upside the head here a little bit. Jesus is coming back. He is talking about the Feast of Trumpets. Whenever he comes back, it will be on the Feast of Trumpets. You don't know the day or the hour. He's talking about the Feast of Trumpets. But no one in your circle who teaches you knows anything about that. They're good people. Okay? They're good people, dedicated. But they were taught by the system. Okay? I'm going to say it to you this way. I'm going to try to make this comparison for you. When I told my wife and my kids that the earth was flat, I told them individually. And they had varying reactions. They laughed. They thought I was kidding. They were flabbergasted until I told them that I was serious. And then their mind got a chance to be opened to something different and to a realization that, wait a minute, what do you mean? Do you mean that everything, that some of the things that we've been taught are not true? You see? that opens the possibility to question some things. And that's what I hope this does for you with religion. Because, I'm just going to say it, religion is the greatest deception in the world. It's greater than all the truther things that I've ever shared with you. It's the greatest. Religion teaches you that God is angry and that God didn't have a plan, or if he had a plan, it got messed up. Teaches you that you have to do things to win favor with God in some way, and that God is going to torture a vast majority of his creation forever. Again, they're dedicated and nice people. They're trying to do what's right. They're just blind to the truth of who God really is and what God is really like. As Paul says in Romans, they have a zeal for God. They're busy trying to do all this stuff, but it is without knowledge. They just don't understand who God is. So, I want this, like again, everybody knows that verse. And what I just told you shows you that everything they're teaching is off. It reminds me of when Hallie got baptized. And you know, I didn't sit around for the sermon, but I was outside in the hall and I could hear certain things. And he was talking about, and I'm sure the guy's a great guy, but he was talking about 70 times 7 and about how that really just means that God intends for you to forgive people a lot more than you think you're supposed to. Well, let me clarify that for you, just so you can see. They all have the same lesson plan that they're learning from, and they learned from the system. Okay, when Jesus is talking about 70 times 7, he had already told the disciples that they needed to forgive people 7 times. That's why Peter said, should we forgive 7 times? And Jesus said, no, 70 times 7. Well, you have to understand that these people, the people that were back there, were from the house of Judah. And Jesus was the Lion of the tribe of Judah, which the house of Judah included Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. The other tribes were part of the northern kingdom, and we can go over that at any point in time. But when Jesus says that to them, he's reminding them of something, that they would see it different than you're going to see it because you don't know this to the same degree. Jeremiah is explaining to them that they are going to be captive, that they are going to be taken over by Babylon. That's why Jeremiah in 29 verse 11 says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to give you hope in a future, plans not to harm you, blah, blah, blah. And it is because they're about to go into captivity for 70 years, and God is not finished with them yet. That's what that's about. So, why they were going to go into 70 years of captivity? They were in the land for 490 years. And they were supposed to let the land lay fallow every 7th year. The land was supposed to get a Sabbath rest. They didn't do that. God forgave them 490 times. And then he didn't. Then the Babylonians came, took them out of the land, and the land received what it owed, 70 years of rest. That's the 70 times 7. And they would have understood that. You see, people are teaching from what they've learned standpoint. And you have to remember, Jeremiah was a prophet to the house of Judah, and Daniel was in Babylon. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that stuff happened in Babylon. The northern kingdom had already been gone, the house of Israel. They had been gone for 200 years or so, because the Assyrians captured them and took them out of their land and scattered them throughout what ended up being Europe and everything else. So that's a different story for a different time. But you see, you're being taught something that's man-made. They're just making it up because they've been taught it and it sounds right to them and it sounds right to you. Okay? So I'm going to finish this way, and this doesn't match up exactly with what I've just been talking about, but it will be good. It will be something. It's something I wrote in my journal yesterday, and it deals with why does God do what he does the way he does it. So let's just hold on a second. And I'm just going to read what I wrote, so I'll be looking over here a little bit. On my drive home, I wrote this yesterday. On my drive home yesterday from Dallas by myself, I was thinking about God stuff. God intends to be known and to share his life with us. Everybody needs to understand that. And to do that, he had and has a plan. And his plan was for contrast to be a big part of how we gain understanding and insight into who he is and what his character is like and what his attributes are. How could God's power be seen if he hadn't created an adversary with great power also, so that God could overcome him? How could God's love be shown if there was no hate to form a contrast? How could his love be seen if he did not love in spite of our rebellion and sin? How could God's mercy and grace be shown unless there was fault? How could God's plan and the fact that God has a plan be shown if nothing had ever gotten off course, and I'd say off course like that, and which he directed back on course? The angelic realm was immortal, and they rebelled. This part, I want you to really ponder. Adam was not immortal, and he was not mortal. He wasn't immortal because he could die, but he was not made mortal. He was not dying. In dying, you are dying. You and I are dying from the minute we're born. So he was not immortal and he was not mortal. He rebelled. And after the kingdom age, when human beings have seen the risen Christ, as well as immortal human beings, Satan will be released for a period of time and will be able to start a worldwide rebellion in 45 to 75 days. I don't know exactly what that time frame is. And at the end, every creature in the heavens and on the earth and under the earth will proclaim that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. And this proclamation that they made will be done out of adoration. It won't be forced. The wording is out of adoration. You might say, well, why does God need this contrast? Why couldn't he just make it perfect? Well, think about it. He did for two people. Now, God wasn't trying to see what would happen with them. He understood. But just so you and I can see, Adam and Eve were not mortal. They were not in dying, you will be dying. They were in complete harmony with everything around them. They had provision everywhere they looked. And they had fellowship with God every day. And for whatever reason, all of that wasn't enough. Because they had nothing to compare it to. Lastly, the diminishment of mankind. The fact that we're in this diminished state and we're going to endure the lowest thing that can happen, death. The diminishment of mankind is the perfect backdrop for the glory of God, the grace of God, the mercy of God, the love of God, the power of God, etc. It's the perfect backdrop for all of that to be seen. God is better than you think he is. He is much better, much bigger. And his plan is being accomplished. Even though you think, and I would think, there might be some hiccups going on. No. It is as he intended. And we will get to see him more for who he is and have a better understanding of his attributes and his nature and his character. He'll be known in a better way than he ever could be with our limited self. And we're going to share in his life. I just want you to see that.